Jim, I'd like to talk a little bit with you about coping with the loss of meaning in life. And as I come to this conversation, I realize I come as a theologian and one interested in the world of philosophy. You come as one interested in those worlds, but with your specialty in the area of psychotherapy. And when I raise the question of loss of meaning as a problem in life, I'm not sure that the psychological literature really handles that all that well, although we've had psychotherapists like Viktor Frankl and Carl Jung who have written about it. But it raises that question of the dialogue between the theologian and the psychologist.
Within academic psychology, I've heard, incidentally, both of the people you mentioned, C.J. Jung and Viktor Frankl, described not as psychologists, that they're social philosophers, not psychologists.
Because they've raised the question of meaning.
Because they've raised the question of meaning. Science can't touch the question. Now, even though there are some psychologists, like Charles Osgood out at the University of Illinois, who spent his entire life studying meaning, and has used all kinds of very clever and creative experiments to try to get people to divulge and behave in reference to kind of the meaning that they have for words and how meaning changes. I don't think that is very important. And to me, that kind of meaning doesn't mean very much.
Mm-hmm.
What the kind of meaning that you're speaking of now is the meaning to the human experience, the meaning of life, the meaning of love, the meaning of pain and anguish. And formal psychology has not been able to touch those issues. And so the people who do deal with them, even though they may have come from psychology, end up being called social philosophers.
Yes,
and
right.
Certainly,
or maybe even theologians
or
on
maybe
occasion.
Even theologians.
Right. Well, let's talk a little bit about this symptom, because I mean it is very real. I think it was Carl Jung who said that in his experience, all of the problems of people over the age of 40 related not to sexuality as Freud had suggested, but really to questions of meaning. Mm-hmm. That as you got older, that is the kind of question that began to resonate within mind and heart. And so I know that we talk to a lot of people who sense a loss of this. I mean, I'm thinking of young people who would just say, well, I don't know why I should study at all. Mm-hmm. I don't really know why I'm in school. Why am I going to college at all? It doesn't seem to make any sense to me. There's no meaning in it. Does it really have any purpose or not? And so it is a rather common phenomenon. I think, again, picking up on Jung, if we look at a lot of middle-age crisis as we talk about it, it seems to have that character. Like, I've been working at this job for 22 years now, but what does it really mean? Mm-hmm. Am I accomplishing anything? Or in the great scheme of things, is it worthwhile or not? So we certainly see this syndrome, whether people in your profession want to deal with it directly or not. They probably call it something else, but it certainly is real in the people that we deal with.
Absolutely. I was speaking yesterday to a woman who's a very successful salesperson and has been making some very big sales and being given lots of rewards. And yet she confessed that for her, she went through training in which she was told how to respond to certain questions, how to respond to when the client says certain things, and she would go home at night and feel the whole thing is a script, the whole thing. And then she would do that, and she would be a successful salesperson, but she would go home and say, but it doesn't have any meaning. It's like the meaning has gone out of it. I'm running through a script, and I'm a player in some play that I don't even know the outcome of, and probably wouldn't go to see if it was in the theater.
Yeah.
And yet here I am playing in it every day.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's a good example of a loss of meaning.
Yes, it is.
A loss of excitement.
Right.
And the other side of that, I'm reminded when we speak of meaning of recently hearing a discussion by Richard Alpert, and who at one time was very big into drugs and the psychedelic. He was a colleague of Timothy Leary, in fact, at Harvard, and was proposing, that people get active in taking drugs and acid and LSD and
as a way of mind expansion and raising consciousness, as I recall.
Right, and he tells a significant event in his life was he was giving a lecture and really proposing that people get into this. Although he had already had some questions, he says it becomes difficult. You start telling people, you go to give a lecture, and people are sort of phasing out or passing out in the middle of your talk, or turning to look at a wall and paying much more attention to a bug on the wall than to you. He says, so he already had some questions about what he was doing.
Yeah.
But he was talking really about getting turned on. And there was a woman in the audience who clearly was relating to him. And he would talk about becoming one with the universe, and she would nod her head and smile. And he would talk about expanding and growing and becoming alive and being fully in love with life and what you were doing. And she was nodding and smiling. And he was fascinated because she didn't fit in the audience. She was middle-aged. Mm-hmm. She wore her hair in a kind of a tight bun. She was dressed in sort of a frumpy dress. And he was fascinated because no matter what he said, she seemed really to be relating. And so afterwards, he went up to approach her. And in the language of the day, he said to her, well, what are you on? Just what are you into? And she said, crochet. Which he describes as like a turning point in his life, that the meaning didn't lie in the particular behavior, or in that case, in a drug that they were taking. That the meaning this person had found was in doing something and giving themselves to doing it, and giving themselves fully to doing it.
Right, committing themselves to it, being wholehearted about the project, yeah.
Because therein lies the meaning. That certainly in our particular culture, these days, certainly in the culture of the 80s, meaning has lost its meaning. That making money is supposed to mean something, but the people who so feverishly were spending their life making money were also those coming to say, but so what?
Yeah. So
what? I'm 30 years old and I've made $50,000 this year. So what? And it's like the meaning has gone out of it. The meaning, like as you say, the loss of meaning.
Right.
It's not that they're doing something wrong. It's not that they're doing something evil or immoral. Although I personally sometimes think that it's arguable that they are doing something immoral and wrong, when they are simply going through motions and having only one focus. But it's a loss of any kind of excitement in life, a loss of vivaciousness, of vigorousness.
It's ashes in the mouth. It's the blahs that take over, and it's the sense of the rat race very often. It's just going round and round. It raises the distinction maybe between meaning and purpose. Meaning has to do generally with coherence. Does it fit together? Does it make sense in a way? Purpose has more the sense, is it going any place? Is there direction? And I think both things often get lost in our culture. Not only doesn't it have interior consistency or coherence, meaning in that sense, but is the whole thing going any place? Is there any sense in the whole process of life, or this existence of mine? And again, they are very much religious questions, aren't they? It's like here theology and psychology come together. As a therapist, you begin to see we're dealing here with a spiritual question. Is there purpose to the universe? Some have talked about cosmic meaning and played it off against personal meaning. I guess cosmic meaning would sense that suggest that the whole thing has a purpose. There's a plan of God. There's a mysterious working out of the Lord's plan going on in history, and we can sort of count on that. I think that's the way a lot of people, religious people, have dealt with this current problem. No, God has a plan for me. I don't understand it. I don't know how I fit into it, but it's all part of it, and God will make sure it comes out all right, in a sense. That seems to be one religious statement of how people find this cosmic meaning. But there's also what we'd call a personal meaning. I would get this distinction from the existentialists like Albert Camus, for example, who said that fundamentally life is absurd. In other words, there is no cosmic story. There's no larger story, but there is a personal story. And so Camus lived as a humanist and fought for causes and wrote novels and philosophical tracts and so on. So he's found a personal meaning in living out courageously, trying to live up to his humanistic values and so on, while denying there was a cosmic story. Now that's sort of an interesting thing. I'd really, in my own experience, have not met a lot of people who were able to do that, divorce those two, who said, yeah, my life is personally meaningful, but this whole mess we're in makes no sense. That seems like a hard thing to pull off to me.
Well, certainly there is a need to see oneself in relation to bigger things, and yet it's certainly possible. Others, psychologists like Sheldon Kopp, has frequently referred to the fact that while we are in control of what we do, what happens is totally out of our control and seems, at least from his point of view, to be purely a matter of random happenstance.
So he would say the larger story has no particular meaning or coherence in that sense.
Right.
Nor would the journey have a destiny. Would he want to say that, or a goal?
My guesses about Shelley Kopp is he would say there isn't even any goal.
So well, now that brings up the Eastern thought very often. And I think the Easterners would often suggest that the journey itself it has its own inner meaning, that even if there isn't a goal, there's no place you're going to, there's no destination for the process, it's just cyclical, round and round, in a sense, that still one could find meaning by participating in the journey or in the process or in the rat race, if that becomes your metaphor for life as you experience it. I think in the Western world, and I think this is the great invention or discovery of the Jewish community, the Israelites that we know in the Hebrew Scriptures, was that no, history has a direction, that history is what happens as God and human beings interact, and therefore the new can happen. All their neighbors had that cyclical view of that it's nothing but over and over. We're just repeating what the gods did a long time ago, and everything's running downhill, so to speak. And the great insight of the Israelites, and I think an enduring contribution of the Jewish community, is that history has a purpose or a direction, and that this was what supplies the meaning in life. And of course in the Christian world we've taken over that notion from our Jewish friends and seen it epitomized in Jesus Christ and him setting a direction and through his resurrection guaranteeing in a sense that the whole process will reach its fulfillment. So I see a very different emphasis here in the East and the West, and I suspect a difference between the thought of Sheldon Kopp that you were talking about, yes, and that's Art of, what is it, Motorcycle Maintenance? What's his book?
Shelley Kopp, If You Meet the Buddha on the road, kill him.
Yeah, that's right.
He also wrote a more recent one, If Even a Stone Can Be a Teacher.
Oh, okay, yeah. I was trying to recall. Yeah, that's right. If you meet the Buddha on the road, kill him. Anyway, but I suspect there's a difference between him and a standard Christian theologian like Paul Tillich, who would posit some meaning to the whole process, I think.
Well, you used an interesting phrase there that, at least for me to give thought to, though. You said inner meaning, and that presupposes that there is such a thing as outer meaning, as external meaning. And it seems to me that may be where our breakdown or where the loss of meaning is, of people seeking some sort of inner meaning by paying attention to it purely externals. And that's where the meaning gets lost. That certainly the inner meaning has to come from within, from doing like the woman and Richard Alpert, who was achieving oneness and love of life and growth and excitement through crocheting. That it's not in the crocheting, and reading all of the rule books on crocheting is not going to get that, is not going to create that. Certainly there are some very healthy businessmen, but reading all of the books on business and accounting and becoming an accountant and a business manager by the rules of whoever the boss is not what lends meaning to that. If anything, that robs the meaning from it. And it seems to me that's where our meaning is lost these days in this particular culture, is people following all of the external rules and not paying attention to their inner messages.
Right, so you're back to that phrase, the inner meaning, and there's a great suggestion in a sense that it has to do with the perspective and attitudes and the wholeheartedness we bring to any of our activities.
Right.
Again, I would think that meaning is a byproduct of engagement. That might be one of the things that we would look at here. That is, if we're going to find, if someone's sitting there telling you, well, I don't have any meaning in life, well, I mean, what do you tell them? Oh, yeah, there's meaning. I think it's more like, well, get involved in something.
Yes.
Take up crocheting or learn to work hard or make a contribution to your family or love your spouse or raise your children or whatever it is, that the meaning will come as the byproduct of engagement, of wholehearted involvement in the life that we're called to live. That's where, I mean, that's the kind of therapy that I would think that is essential to all this.
To do it.
Yeah.
to do it.
Yeah, just do it. And sometimes in dealing with people, I just say, I don't think it matters what choice you make, to tell you the truth. Just choose one of them and get into it, and really make the most of it. And then that's the way one will find meaning. It's you can't find meaning sitting on the sidelines, like watching a volleyball game and saying, I wonder what it's like to play. There's really only one way, and that's to go out and play, and then you figure out whether it appeals to you or not, or whether it makes sense, or whether you get something out of it. So involvement or engagement seem to be one of the coping techniques that we're going to suggest in dealing with meaninglessness in our modern culture.
Oh yeah, I frequently tell people that. I tell them the next time they watch the Nike commercial to live it. 'Cause that is the message.
You're not suggesting that they are going to get up in the air like Michael Jordan, are you?
Huh? Why not?
You'd be creating false expectations.
No. No, if they start expecting they can do it, then that's paying attention to the externals.
Oh, okay.
They got to do what they can do.
From within, yeah.
You know, like the kids who now are sticking their tongue out when they try to make a jump shot. Because Michael Jordan, yeah. Okay. It's not sticking your tongue out that's going to make you feel good.
Right.
It's doing what you can do with everything you got in you.
Yeah.
Like going the limit.
Right.
That's the message of just do it, and do it with everything you got.
Yeah.
That's where meaning comes from.
Sure. And again, directly sought meaning will be something like happiness, and like community, it will dissolve as you seek it. It will have a vaporous character to it. You won't ever get a hold of it. It comes as byproduct. No, when we're talking about meaning, Jim, and saying there's not a lot written in the psychological literature, I think we do have to go back and look at Viktor Frankl here and his work on what he calls logotherapy.
Right.
And isn't his book called A Man's Search for Meaning? He took it on directly. And Viktor Frankl got a lot of his ideas from being in terrible, horrible, almost unspeakable experiences in the concentration camps, where he was able to survive by sort of fostering the search for meaning. And meaning became the key. You had to have a goal. You had to have something you're working towards, in a sense, to be able to make sense out of your life. I know for some of the people who've been in horrible circumstances like that, it's simply been to preserve the record of this terrible atrocity, that to keep the memory alive of it becomes a goal that gives one some meaning in life. I think some other survivors have done that, and I can't think of the word I want to use. The survivors of the nuclear bombing, the hibachi, who take it as a life goal, sort of to speak for peace, or to say how terrible war is, because they know it out of their experience. But that's been their way to transform a horrible existence into some meaningful activity.
To do it.
Yeah.
To just do it.
Yeah, and I guess Frankl brings in more this idea of a goal. I mean, of having goals in life, and we might look at that. I mean, suppose someone comes in and they say they have this there's no meaning in life, and say it's a college student, and why should they be studying at all? Maybe, I don't know about this now, but I mean, maybe one way of saying it is, well, does it make any sense to try to pass this one course? I mean, maybe the reason you say there's no meaning is because this course is really hard and you're afraid you're going to fail in it. And if you could set a realistic goal in relationship to it, work hard at it, like to get a C in this course, go every day, do the papers, you can make a C, make that your goal, and maybe that would turn it around for you. That would be having like a short-term goal that might help in this therapy.
Of doing what you can do. Of just doing something. In such cases, doing anything is better than doing nothing. I sometimes tell people to give them an assignment that each day they have to do something that they've never done before in their life. I don't care how small it is. It might be driving to work on a route they've never taken before. But each day do something that they've never done before in their whole life, whatever that is, as a way of fostering an awareness that there are things we can do.
Yes.
And that there really is no such thing as helplessness.
I think I've known people who have seemed to do well in their lives when they had career change times or crisis moments when they've taken on some new kind of activity, very often of a sort of philanthropic character or a helping character. I remember one fellow was out of work and lost his job, middle management type, and could have been in a terrible depression and no sense in life, no meaning at all. But what he did while he was looking for a job is go work in a soup kitchen and help serve others. And it was his therapy. I mean, his goal became not just to find a job, which was very difficult at the time, but to help some other people while he was in the midst of this. And as byproduct, it turned out that he did find a new meaning in life. And I thought it was a very constructive response to a very deep problem. And I do think that it happens to people a lot of times these days when they lose their job or find their failures in their family or their kids don't turn out right or something. That's when they sense, wow, what does it all mean? Put all this hours, energy, time into this project of building a family, and here it's fallen apart.
Collapses.
Yeah, that is when, it would take me back to the question of faith. I mean, being a product of the Judeo-Christian tradition, I mean, I think the Jewish insight that there's purpose or meaning, that there's a cosmic meaning or a large story, helps me a great deal, I must say. And I think it's an attribute or an asset of our Judeo-Christian tradition that we can bring to bear. And I believe in that to say that there's a plan, that God has a plan for the universe, or that, put in other language, that this evolutionary process is going to reach its goal someday, or that history will find its ultimate purpose, etc. That an individual life, as Carl Jung once said, everything that should enter a person's life will enter it.
Right.
It's sort
usually
of
at the most distressing moment.
Yeah, right. It's an enigmatic statement, but it plays to this idea that somehow there's meaning connected with all this. So, I mean, to me, the faith perspective is very important. And I must say, I think I play to that in my own counseling and spiritual direction.
Sure.
Even if you don't see it right now, that it may well be that you're fitting into an overall plan. I see this happening, Jim, is sometimes people in retrospect will say, this was horrible, I was in this divorce, or my kid was incorrigible or on drugs, but in the long run I learned something from it, or I'm a more compassionate person because I met this failure in life, or I'm more empathetic with other people who are struggling. It seems in retrospect we often can find meaning in events, even at the moment we can't find them.
Yeah, even in our struggle, that there is something a little larger than that going on. And I'm reminded when I stopped smoking, I was talking to a friend of mine, and I was sort of lamenting that was really driving me crazy. And he says, "Wow, that's terrific."
What, that it was driving you crazy?
Yeah.
Or
And I says, "What do you mean terrific?" He says, "Think of all the empathy you can have now for all the people you work with who are getting unaddicted to something."
That's what we're going to do, is have all therapists give up smoking or whatever their compulsive behavior is, so they can have some sense of really what it's all about, what the human struggle is.
So I was really teasing him about that. And another time we were talking, and I was complaining about something, and he gave me the same. "Hey, that's terrific." And I said, "What do you mean by that now?" And he says, "I don't know. But if it's painful, there's got to be something terrific going on
Something will
somewhere."
happen that you'll bring some good out of it. Yeah. Some have suggested that that group involvement is good in dealing with this question, and that even that part of the therapy that goes on in finding a good spiritual director or counselor or psychotherapist like yourself is that you're interacting with somebody else who seems to be living wholeheartedly, or who tries to be present to the moment. And that's out of that something good happens. You sense there's a fulfillment, or you sense that I sense I'm helped because you listen to me. You're engaged in the moment. And maybe, again, that's part of how people find some meaning, by actually interacting with other people who find meaning as a byproduct of their own engagement in life.
Oh, absolutely. That we find the meaning within by doing things without. And by doing things with other people, we find some of ourself. And the meaning that we're seeking, the meanings that we have lost, we will come upon by doing things, and especially the things that we do with other people.
Do you think that a lot of therapy works, and I suppose this is the standard theory, that a lot of therapy works simply because the therapist brings compassion and concern and care and understanding attitude to the person that they deal with?
Oh,
and if that's
absolutely.
true, I would
Yeah.
think that we can all do a bit of that in our families or in our parishes or in our friendships.
Absolutely. I think that therapy is what it is that goes on whenever two human beings allow themselves to be open to each other, whether that's in a therapist's office or whether it's on a date between a young couple, or whether it's two friends playing golf, and then maybe while they're walking across the green can say something to each other that somehow breaks through all of the meaninglessness of ritual and of empty ritual, and to gets through to the person that that's what adds meaning, that's what is meaning, and that's where meaning comes from. And certainly a therapist's office is artificial, so it happens sometimes less there than it might happen on a golf course, but it's still the event of human beings coming through to each other that fulfills, that nourishes.
I suppose a lot of times for religious people, again, it's looking at the great religious figures. So, the Jewish community might look at Moses, or the Muslim community to Muhammad, or the Buddhist to Siddhartha Gautama, and in that person they see someone who is dedicated to a cause, like Jesus is dedicated to the kingdom, and he gives himself over to it, and in the process is able not only to live out meaning, but to articulate it. And I think that, in other words, I'm suggesting it happens not just in our friendships or with a therapeutic relationship, but for a lot of us in terms of our religious traditions that bring all that up. Well, Jim, we've been talking here about coping with meaninglessness, with the loss of meaning in life. And what I'm getting out of this is that one of the keys is to not just introspection. I don't just look within and say I'm going to find meaning somehow, but I get it by living life, by living it wholeheartedly, being engaged, by reaching out and helping others. And then the meaning seems to come as a byproduct, and as I would say, a gift, one that we sense comes from the source of all good gifts.